So my name is Alice Bell. I did have an Alice Bell slide. There we go. My name is Alice Bell. I'm at BabyGotBell on Twitter. I am the staff writer for videogamer.com. I am a shortstop for Team Rocket. Do not talk to me if I have headphones on. See, I'm topical, right? So yeah, I am following on from Rob Morgan, which is a terrifying residency to and a tough act to follow. So I'm just not really going to try. Because I'm doing 6 talks, you'll notice there's a hilarious portmanteau, a fucked up, and sextuplet. So this is the fuckeduplet. And number 1 is dialogue in games is fucked. It doesn't really fit into the theme of this VideoBrains, but the others will, so it's okay. I'm not actually swearing this, but I know it's called the fuckeduplet, but there won't be that much swearing. I did actually this is a genuine comment I got on a recent review I did. Too many F-bombs, milady. Number of F-bombs used in the review, 2, which is the same number of O's that should be in the word. So it's not actually, this talk isn't actually that rude, and there isn't a dick hidden in the slides, sadly, but there is one in every single scene, which is a beautiful legacy, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, we're going to talk about dialogue a little bit, which is interesting to me. I did English as a BA at university, and language changes very quickly. There's always people, every generation has angry people who don't like linguistic evolution because change is bad and wrong, and we should sell fruit by the pound, ladies and gentlemen. But language in speech changes faster than written language tends to be able to keep up with it. And in fact, in France, they have something called the Académie Française, thank you, which tries to sort of keep up with the anglicization of their language. And this actually refers a lot to technical things as well. So the word for email and computer, in French people used to say, computer, because it was invented by English-speaking people, I guess, or like talked of in terms of English. But the Académie Française makes new words to cope with that kind of thing. So computer is ordinateur, and I believe email is courriel, but you may want to correct me if I'm wrong, which they make from existing words in French and then sort of rationalize what these new terms would be. There's also different things that affect language and dialogue. So Victorian writers like Dickens and Victor Hugo were paid by the word, which people think kind of affected the wordiness of their dialogue. This is in fact a lie, it's not true, but people tend to think it is. What a lot of people actually think is that they were kind of, I mean, Hugo definitely not, but Dickens was he was used to space filling because of all his time as a journalist, which is why his dialogue and stuff is more wordy. Yeah, alright. And then people talk a lot about the idea of naturalistic dialogue, which I tend to think of being the opposite of what Kevin Smith does in his films, and we'll come back to that later in the talk. Language in video games. In Rob's previous talk, he actually, or one of his previous talks, which was called Throwing Your Voice, which I believe was from the All Day a couple of years ago, yeah. He talks about how in characterization in games, you need to sort of feel a connection to the player character. So either you feel like you are embodying them and you are them, or you are attached to them in some way, so you want to support, you want to help their kind of story. And dialogue in video games, this is one of the purposes that can serve. It also can need to contribute to world building, so feel authentic within the world that you are playing, otherwise it kind of brings you out of the game world. It can also have a purely mechanical job, for example, exposition. So if you turn up an NPC and they're like, why, it's the prince of whatever's doing this thing, and and also it helps to define characters. And again, we're going to come back to that later in the talk. Now, this is by no means an exhaustive list. There are many purposes that dialogue serves, but these are some of the ones that I kind of felt were uppermost in my mind when talking about this. So we're going to talk about ways that can go wrong in games. So one of the ways it can go wrong is just if in somewhere in the development process kind of gets a bit out of sync. So this is, I think some of you know where we're going with this. This is from L.A. Noire. How many people have played L.A. Noire? Basically everyone. That's good. So for those who don't know, and anyone watching at home who doesn't know, In LA Noire, you play a detective and you interview suspects, and then when they make a statement, you can say, truth that you believe them. You can say that you think they're lying, or you can doubt them, which is just you kind of, I guess, would say, I don't quite believe you. I think you're telling a bit of the truth. In practice, however, the response that you get for doubt is so incredibly aggressive that it should be probably more truth, lie, or yell at an elderly woman so aggressively I legit thought he was about to slam her face into her old lady coffee table. Which is what I thought. And a lot of people noticed this. And it turned out that actually what happened is that originally it was coax, force, and lie. So it was more active, it was more kind of aggressive, and they recorded all the voice dialogue and the mocap and everything with the actor Aaron Staton, I think that's his name, from Mad Men, that's the bunny, with that in mind. And then later in the development they decided that was maybe a little bit too active and it should be more investigative maybe, but they did not re-record the dialogue, so you end up with it being a little bit out of sync, and perhaps not what you expected when you doubted the old lady's statement. Another way it can go wrong is just kind of by sort of being a bit rubbish. So, how many people played Two Worlds or Two Worlds 2? It's terrible, there we go. So, some people did actually like the content of the game around the dialogue and the voice acting. But in Two Worlds and Two Worlds 2, it's kind of a like standard fantasy, Tolkienian kind of fantasy world. And the dialogue is sort of, I suppose, supposed to be kind of medieval. So there's a lot of thou and thy and sort of pseudo-Shakespearean kind of stuff going on. One of my favourite lines is, I think in the first one, the protagonist says, "Say hello to death!" And it got reviews such as, encumbered by possibly the worst script we've ever encountered in a video game. That's for the first one, from the Metro. Imagine Stephen Wright at a Renaissance fair, from IGN. And then, wow, 200%, I don't know really what it is, but it says the script has that magical quality that films like The Room have. So some people thought that the dialogue was intentionally cheesy and used the phrase, saying the game has its tongue in its cheek. I tend to think that if it does have its tongue in its cheek, someone else is holding an imaginary dick up by its face. Because it's really bad, and because the sort of dryness of the voice acting does not match the kind of over-dramatic and kind of cheesy lines, so it doesn't really work on any level. It's just kind of bad. Having said that, like I said, some people really like the rest of the content of it. So another thing is, it's sort of linking back to Ellen Watts, when sometimes, especially in romance, you don't really know or get the result that you're expecting. And this happens a lot in some games where you have a lot of choice, you have a lot of interactivity, but the nature of games is that, as it is, you will never get all the options or the option that you as a person would have in a conversation. And so they give you a kind of conversation flavour, I guess, a dialogue flavour that you can choose from in BioWare games. But that isn't actually what you end up saying. So this is Garrus, and this is a pivotal point in Mass Effect 3, where you're talking to Garrus about how he had sex with someone he was on another ship with. And he says that they ended up holding a tiebreaker for hand-to-hand combat in her quarters. I had reach, but she had flexibility. Now, Garrus was my bro, and I didn't want to have sex with Garrus, but I accidentally did. Because to me, the text choices were ambiguous enough that I accidentally picked the flirty one, and he was like, "Yeah, let's go," So, so that was a beautiful friendship ruin. But the main thing that I kind of think video game dialogue suffers from is actually something that I found is on a blog called The Howling Rabbit, written way back in 2010 by someone called Kendall Gray. And I'm just attributing to this because it actually kind of crystallized a lot of my thoughts. They refer to Kevin Smith syndrome. And a lot of people really like Kevin Smith's dialogue in his films. I kind of don't. And it's for the basic reason that none of the characters are really very individual, and they're basically all Kevin Smith. So they all talk exactly the same, and they all talk like Kevin Smith. So that no characters then are very individual. And so on this blog, they recommend just taking the dialogue, taking all the names off it, and then just reading the dialogue. So if you do that with video games, this is a very quick one. Well, we got that bastard. Still, he's not the one responsible for killing your Marines. Sorry, mate. Man's a ghost. Intel says he's gone underground. Well, I got a plan to find him. I'm listening. Daddy's... So when you take all the names out of that, it's kind of hard to guess how many people are in the conversation. There's a little bit of characterization. You can maybe guess someone in it's American, maybe someone's British. There are actually 3 people in the conversation. And that is maybe a bit unfair of me because it's from Modern Warfare, Call of Duty 4 Modern Warfare. So you can do it with other games as well. This one is from a first-person narrative-driven story. Bullet grazed my shoulder, you cliffside grazed my face, so how'd you lose Rafe? I led his crew right into one of Avery's traps. Smart. Hey, look about the whole Alcazar thing, we could say that for later, okay? Which way? On the beach, other side of this town. That's actually got 4 different people in it. The only kind of strong characterization is from Sully, who kind of says, we're getting the hell off of this rock, and you can kind of get a little bit of his personality through that. This isn't me having a dig at games like Uncharted 4 or Call of Duty Modern Warfare necessarily. This is just something that happens a lot in video games. And it's really, the onus then is put a lot on the voice actors. So, you know, another good use of dialogue is to keep, you know, Troy Baker in meaningful employment, I guess. But it does then mean that all the onus is on the voice actors to provide the personality, but which is fine, I guess, but it would be easier for everyone, and I think more enjoyable, if it was on the page as well. And would possibly avoid problems like in 2 Worlds and 2 Worlds 2, where the onus was on the voice actors, but it failed. So we can talk about games that kind of do things right and are more interesting. So Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines is a game that gets a lot of things wrong, but also a lot of things right, and I really like it. So it references that it's a game, but in a way that won't necessarily make you want to claw your own eyes out. It has different dialogue options that are unlocked if you're at different states in the game, so your humanity. Nobody in it says we're not so different, you and I, which happens more often in games than I'm comfortable with. And finally you have Malkavians and the Gift of Insight. So Malkavians are a clan of vampire that you can join, and in the games it was traditionally said that they are cursed with insanity. But latterly that is referred to as the Gift of Insight. How appropriate that is or not, it did manifest, interestingly at least, in the game, where Malkavians had an entirely different language tree to any other character you could play as. They had completely different options, and in fact, if you played the game through as Malkavians first, the dialogue actually has clues to what happens later in the game that you won't even know about until you finish it, which was very interesting to me. More interesting, however, is, but I know I talk about BioWare a lot, I'm sorry, not sorry. BioWare has a development blog called The Sound and the Fury, and in that they discuss, the writers discuss the different musics that they listened to when they were writing different characters. So this is Solus. I romanced Solus, and he's an asshole. But Patrick Weeks, the writer that was the lead writer for Solus, listened to Katie Lang's cover of Hallelujah on repeat. Jordan, warm up those vocal cords. So this is the first verse from Hallelujah. Would anyone like to sing it? There we go, sing along.
You don't really care for music, do ya? It goes like this: the fourth, the fifth, the minor fall, the major lift, the baffled king composing hallelujah.
That was so much better than I thought it was going to be. Okay. This is some of Solus's dialogue. Do it again.
Journey deep into fading ancient ruins and battlefields to see the dreams of lost civilizations. I've watched luscious hosts of spirits clash to reenact the bloody past in ancient wars from famous and forgotten.
Isn't that kind of cool? And in fact, Patrick Weeks said there are the responses that you can give as the player character that then fall into the same meter and the same lyrical pattern. And if you choose one of those responses, you then get more approval from Solus. And that is never flagged up in the game, that is never told to you, that is just something that happens, right? And all the writers, it's a really interesting blog, and I suggest you read it, because all the writers have different songs and playlists that they use for different characters. So we have the Iron Bull and Cole, for example, I think are two of the most contrasting characters. And I really like it where they're in a party together, because Cole especially has completely different dialogue and is a completely different person. If you took those names out, you would know that they were different people, which is good. And very finally, because there is one thing that we have not touched on. What's the common thread there? The silent protagonist, yeah. So the silent protagonist is really useful because if the protagonist does not speak, then you don't know that you're not that protagonist. Does that make sense? Which I did not like about Adam Jensen, because I think the balance is off with him, because he does speak, he does have a personality, but the world he's in is kind of too immersive, so it's kind of stuck between being an immersive sim and being an RPG, because you cannot interact with the world, and you feel like Adam Jensen would. Whereas Bioshock Infinite, I feel, strikes a better balance, because Fuckeduplet does speak, he does have a personality, but the world is still realistically formed. You still have barbershop quartets singing pop songs and that kind of shit. I know that doesn't sound realistic. But you can't interact with it as much, and Booker has very simple aims: find the girl, wipe away the debt, that do not bring you out of being him as a character. But still, if you can't do dialogue in games right, it is still a good option to say nothing at all.